And joining us now with the latest on the ceasefire in Gaza and Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to the United States next week is Brigadier General Israel Shafir, former Air Force Base Commander, and Dan Diker, President of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
So,
good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So, Dan, let's start with you. Looking toward the Prime Minister's visit to the White House next week, what kind of reception do you think he will receive there?
The Prime Minister is taking a victory lap together with President Trump following a successful joint massive military operation, Rising Lion, against the Iranian regime's nuclear and ballistic missile program, and obviously their successful cooperation in destroying very sensitive elements of the regime. This is a momentum play by both Netanyahu and Trump. Clearly, Netanyahu has stated time and time again for the last 20 months that Israel will not compromise on several red line principles. Red line number one is the elimination of Hamas as a military and political power, governmental power in Gaza, and we will have to witness the elimination completely, perhaps the deportation of Hamas leaders. So the fact that Netanyahu is going earlier than expected means that there is the deal of the century, the real deal of the century, that is currently being is in the oven. And that's why Minister Dermer is there, because Netanyahu would never go to Washington just to discuss some sort of ceasefire, which Hamas doesn't even accept conceptually. There is no such thing in Hamas's vocabulary as ceasefire. There's hudna, there's ta'adiyah, there is no such thing as ceasefire. So Netanyahu is going for a much larger deal of the century than is currently, I think, understood.
So we'll get back to that in a moment. Anissa, I want to turn to you. Trump has said, though, that he will press for a ceasefire deal and then, of course, a potential end to the war and the release of all the hostages. But the question remains, has Israel truly achieved what it set out to achieve in Gaza? Is Israel prepared to end the war?
Well, Israel certainly would like to end the war on its own terms. But the question is it possible to end the war on Israel's terms? And the answer, unfortunately, is no, because Hamas is part and parcel, not just in Gaza, but also in Judea and Samaria. They're a political or even cultural entity, and that does not end, because you can't change people's minds with just a military force. So Israel will have to do with less than a total victory, in that the war will end with some of at least the first stage, some of the hostages coming back. Let's hope that as many as possible. And Israel withdrawing to the perimeter area prior to the next stage, that we will have to see what it is. Israel is in a internal political situation where it has to be forced by the United States into a position. Otherwise, the extreme right wing is threatening to topple the government. So Netanyahu needs a push and shove from Trump who will force him to end the war, so he can present it to his counterparts in the government as a dead-end decision, in that they cannot refuse Trump, while showing in Israel itself having a kind of a victory lap. And sometimes you can actually say that it is a kind of a victory lap, because everybody knows that you cannot annihilate Hamas altogether, neither in Gaza and neither in Judea and Samaria.
And Dan, I want to get back to you. You mentioned that both Trump and Netanyahu, who are really in sync on Iran, both looking to capitalize on the success of that operation. But I have two questions here. One, are they truly in sync when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to ending the war? And you mentioned earlier that you believe that something much larger is on the table, perhaps normalization with Saudi Arabia. Can you maybe expand on that as well?
There are a couple of things here. First, President Trump is in sync with President Trump from moment to moment. I'm not sure it's possible for anyone to be in sync with President Trump unless you really flow with him. He conducts a lot of his foreign policy from Truth Social and Twitter. This is a very different type of president that it's operating from instinct. I think on the issue of Gaza, we have to ask ourselves the following question. President Trump has the characteristics of Winston Churchill, who defeated the Nazi regime together with the Allied forces in World War II. But there is also an element of President Trump that's Neville Chamberlain. And if we're talking about doing another staged what we call a ceasefire in the West opposite Hamas, I think it portends a troublesome indication and message towards Israel and towards Saudi Arabia and the Middle Eastern allies, because the only way to defeat Hamas is not through political ceasefire, but rather through a total military victory, because the population in Gaza of over 2 million people want to see a military victory over the Hamas, and they want to know that there is a new sheriff in town that will guarantee that they will get humanitarian aid, food, and so forth, and that Hamas is finished. That's the only way to win. So here, I do think that what we're seeing is Trump 2.0, the way he dealt with the Iranian regime. Either the Iranian regime did not submit to Trump's dictates on negotiation, therefore they were attacked. I think we're seeing the same thing here. The president is basically saying to Hamas, and this is what Netanyahu agrees to, either you accept our dictates for negotiations, you return the hostages, otherwise Israel has another division in Gaza, and I think that Trump is basically signaling to Minister Dermer, or telling Minister Dermer in so many words, that Israel will have the right to go full force and take over not 60% or 65% of the Gaza Strip, but close to 100% of the Gaza Strip, and completely neuter Hamas.
Israel, do you share that assessment? And I want to also ask, in what state is Hamas heading into a potential ceasefire, and what do you expect will be their game plan?
Well, first of all, talking about sync, Israel is not in sync with the U.S. About Iran. Israel had hoped that the U.S. will conduct a heavy bombing campaign lasting several weeks to take out the nuclear program. But unfortunately, Mr. Trump had delivered several bombs, 9 bombs on those, and said that this is victory. Unfortunately, it's not so, and they're still in pretty good shape. Their nuclear program is still on. So it's certainly not in sync with Israel. And about the Gaza, Trump wants a ceasefire. He wants the Egyptians in, probably with the Palestinian Authority taking a role with the Egyptians and other Arab forces taking control of Gaza. Israel it may be in the interest of Israel. In fact, I'm pretty sure it is the interest of Israel, but it isn't the interest of the Israeli government, because Ben-Gvir and Smotrich will threaten to boycott or to topple the government if there is any mention of a Palestinian state in the making with Saudi Arabia, or the Palestinian Authority being part and parcel of the day after in Gaza. So we're not in sync, but at the end of the day, Trump will have his way, because the Israeli public weighs heavily with Trump rather than with Netanyahu.
Absolutely. So critical days ahead. Brigadier General Shafir and Dr. Dan Diker, thank you both so much for your analysis today.
Thank you.
Thank you.